Motorcycle Adventure Dirt Bike TV, supported proudly by Adventure Spec in the UK, Rally Raid Products, Giant Loop in the United States, Adventure Moto in Australia, Pirelli Tyres, Motul Oils, RK Chains and Australian Adventure Bike Magazine.
Show it off, every curve, every part, yeah. Cause I'm strong and I love the skin I'm in. Every shape, every inch, no doubt there's power deep within, yeah. Beauty ain't a color, ain't a number, ain't an age, nah. Beauty comes in every size and every shade, yeah. I'm perfect just the way I'm made, yeah. Whoa, whoa, I'ma be my best self.
Hey, are you ready? Gonna take that prize. Oh, gotta feel it, and I won't keep quiet. Hey, I'm going, yeah, I feel alive. Oh, get ready, tonight's the night. You know I break through the roof, don't you? You know I'm ready to fight, alright. I'm just a rebel that's on the move.
This is the second in a two-part series of my test of the Husqvarna Norden 901. In the previous episode, we focused on riding the bike and taking it to its design limits. In this episode, I'll be focusing on the features of the bike in more detail, and I'll have a separate discussion on the performance of the WP Pro suspension. The traditional lines of the Norden certainly turns heads. Husky have nailed the styling. I look at this bike and I just want to ride it. It's an understated, polished, sophisticated finish. Not that you'd want to, but you could easily take you and your partner to the opera on a Friday night and then go scrapping in the bush on the Saturday. Although it shares a similar low-slung fuel tank design to the KTM890, they've reduced the volume by about a litre, which in combination with the metallic finish dramatically reduces that bulbous look that turns some riders away from the Kato. In terms of a minor reduction in fuel range, I don't care. The improvement in the look of the bike is worth it. Head on, the bike looks slim and trim, but those classic lines also offer protection to the rider from the elements, so there's a win-win right there. And whilst we're on protection from elements, we need to talk about that windshield. One of the strengths of this bike is it's so aesthetically pleasing. You know, I was up at Kulnura the other day and people were just crowding around the bike and saying, God, that's a nice looking bike. But there's a tension between aesthetics and functionality, and that comes through on this screen. I mean, it looks fantastic, but again, it's just falls a little bit short for me on the longer distance trips, and that became apparent the other day. So I was on the bike for about 2 hours at 110 kilometres, around that speed. And what I found was this fairing punches the wind up, but it drops it short. It just drops it at the top of my helmet, and there was a minor buffeting that... Was it bothering? No, it wasn't, but it was there, and it was just consistently there. And combined with the actual narrowness of the top part of the screen, it's actually hitting, the wind is hitting just on my shoulders, on the periphery of my shoulders. And you might say, well, who cares about that? Well, it doesn't matter for 1 hour at 110 kilometres an hour. It doesn't matter for 2. But once you've been riding for, say, 3 hours, that constant minor buffeting does wear you out. And I guess I'm expecting from a bike at this price range and called an adventure tourer to do adventure touring well. And one of the things that adventure tourers do well is provide great wind protection for riders. Now, I'm aware there is an extendable piece that is available for this bike. I would have loved to have tried it because that might solve the issue that I'm talking about. Now, in terms of issue, is it a big issue? Would it stop me buying the bike? No, it wouldn't. I'm sure there'll be a resolution for it. The seated and standing positions on this bike for my height at 178 centimetres or 5 foot 10 inches tall are ideal. Handlebars can be adjusted away or towards the rider with 6 settings, and foot peg mountings can be lowered. The seat is noticeably triangular, but narrow where it counts when in the standing position. It's very comfortable for those big hours in the saddle. However, in more challenging terrain where I was moving my body weight backwards to get up a rock ledge, I did notice the seat digging into the inside of my legs. But it's a small price to pay for the comfort, as you shouldn't be getting up too many rock ledges on this bike. Positioning and activation of controls when in the standing or seated position on this bike is outstanding. Rear brake activation is a real strength. The foot peg tip is reversible for those that want their brake a little higher, but I found the standard position excellent and it gave me great feel. The gear lever is well positioned. The easy shifter is a real bonus for clutch-free movement through the gears while standing. Front brake and clutch levers get good feel. The activation point of the clutch is reassuringly progressive and a real strength in the tricky stuff, such as slippery mud, and there was lots of that. Likewise, the front brake activation is a two-fingered job, with a subtlety for slippery stuff, yet powerful and predictable when needed. Throttle sensitivity can be dialed in through the bike's electronics and readily available through the TFT screen and can be changed on the fly. Husqvarna have the controls sorted, and the rider benefits enormously by having precise control, particularly when life becomes challenging.
Oh, stalled her.
One of the great successes of the Husqvarna is a very simplified and clear, uncluttered TFT screen to activate traction control, rider entertainment, speedo trip, fuel range and other functions. It's so simple that by the end of the first week of riding the bike, I could initiate many changes using my peripheral vision. And that is the first on a bike for me. Maybe head-up displays aren't too far away. All these changes can be made on the fly by briefly holding the throttle closed. A particular strength of the display is how it represents the different function settings, particularly slip control and ABS. A great advantage at the end of the day when riders are fatigued that very effectively reinforces the bike setup and mode selection. The switch blocks follow the theme of being very functional yet simple. Cruise control activation and setting speed on this bike is one of the best in its class. The indicator and horn buttons have good feel and are easy to find. The switch blocks are illuminated. There's a 12-volt socket in the dash and GPS mount available above the TFT screen, but I wondered how mounting a GPS would go fitting behind the windshield. I'm not sure on that point. Lighting on the bike is good, with the headlight providing strong illumination and throw in both high and low beam settings. A particular strength are the accessory lights that can be activated from the dash that significantly widen light throw and are very useful for the bush should you get caught out travelling at night. Following a request from a subscriber who complained to me the Norden blew hot air onto his lower legs, I devised the hairy leg test. And sure enough, the Norden is blowing warm air onto the lower legs of the rider. I hadn't noticed this during riding, as I always wear boots and a riding suit, and test conditions have been cool. On a hot summer's day, on a technical trail where you're moving slowly, this may add to the heat and reduce rider comfort. A number of new models are putting in extra effort to ensure warm air is not blown onto the rider. As adventure motorcycling recruits new riders faster than any segment in the market, and with a fair share of them coming from the road bike fraternity, there is a trend towards motorcycle manufacturers lowering seat heights. On the standard Norden with the standard seat on its lower setting, I can comfortably place both feet on the ground, and seat height ranges from 854 to 874 millimeters. An optional lowering kit with a shorter shock and a lower seat can reduce that seat height even further. This is great news for those vertically challenged riders or riders lacking a little confidence. But on the bike with the 270mm WP Pro suspension, seat height is considerably higher. So, I can't put both feet on the ground at the same time. So I have to lean the bike one way or the other, and it's on tippy toes. So this bike comes with a centre stand, and it's pretty easy to put up on that. Here we go, and that's it, it's up. The great thing about this centre stand is, you know, in the biggest of jumps I've done, it doesn't flop around. It just stays planted and it doesn't interfere with your riding. It's well out of the way, and I'm really impressed with it. The Norden's frame and running gear are almost identical to the KTM890 Adventure and more dirt-oriented and taller Adventure R. Suspension travel sits smack bang in between these two models. But there are other differences, including a slightly more road-oriented frame and steering geometry, a slightly longer swing arm to improve road stability, and a couple of other odds and ends. The end result is this bike feels very different to its KTM cousins. It feels light and smooth and stable on the road, whilst also being comfortable for those longer distances. But the real beauty for me is the dirt heritage of this bike hasn't been sacrificed along the way. From my perspective, the Norden is a more refined and better looking KTM 890. Husqvarna have labelled this bike an Adventure Tourer. That means big comfortable bike with long range, big service intervals, but not up for the tough stuff. The bike looks stunning, but with its very solid dirt heritage in rolling stock and engine, there is a heap more to it than just touring. I see the potential customers of this bike falling into two very distinct categories. Most customers will see this bike as it's being sold to them, a capable adventure tourer. But there'll be a heap of riders who see this bike like I do, a cracking mid-sized adventure bike capable of taking on anything. I concede Husqvarna have a real challenge with this bike, trying to suit the average rider across worldwide riding conditions. But it's pretty clear they recognise this challenge, and the evidence is found at those high quality triple clamps, where a range of high performance forks slip straight in. To my knowledge, it's also the first adventure bike release in Australia, where they've showcased bikes with suspension upgrades. And for Australian riders and our riding conditions, I think that was a very smart move. The bike is fitted with WP Apex 43mm forks with 220mm of travel. They are fully adjustable with rebound, compression and preload adjustment. Rebound and compression can be altered at the top of the forks on the fly. I found these forks to perform well in a wide range of conditions. As you'd expect of an adventure tourer, they were lovely on the road provided you didn't push the bike too hard. They absorbed long dirt miles well, soaking up the small imperfections in the road that wear you out. And when it got rougher, they absorbed high-speed hits reasonably well, didn't bottom out on small jumps. And when they did come to the end of their stroke, it didn't end with a thud. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the rear shock. The WP Apex monoshock provides 250mm of rear wheel travel and has rebound damping and preload adjustment, but there's no compression damping. The shock performs well on the twisties and on the smooth dirt roads and provides a soft, comfortable ride. On the trail at a reasonable speed, it performs well provided you don't hit a short, sharp rut or pothole. In those instances, the shock falls through the stroke and ends with an uncomfortable thud. Winding up the preload as far as it will go does soften the blow, but ultimately the shock falls through the stroke on high-speed hits. The difference in performance of the front and rear suspension becomes more obvious as trail speed increases. The simple answer is to slow down. But there's more to it than that for Australian riders who see this as their adventure mount loaded with gear for a week away. They will find it necessary to upgrade that rear spring to have static sag within limits. But preload is no replacement for compression damping, and many will replace the rear shock. Considering the finish on this bike, its dirt heritage and the good performance of the front forks, I'm surprised they put a shock of this lower specification on the rear of the bike. Maybe it was to accommodate riders demanding a lower seat height. In this competitive environment, manufacturers have become sensitive to ensuring as low a seat height as possible is offered to the masses.
Okay, time to talk about this suspension, because this is the 270mm WP suspension. This is the top of the range suspension for this bike. And let's start at the forks. I've got to say, I haven't ever experienced a set of forks that give such amazing response in extremely varied conditions. You've got that trail feel, that first 3 centimetres of travel. You know, you can be riding on those slight bumpy trails or the road or rough roads, and that trail feel, these forks soak that up. And that trail feel is important, because if your forks are too hard, it wears you out, and particularly on long rides, you just get beaten up by it. But on this bike, it's outstanding. But then you jump the bike, you know, on an erosion mound or hit a G out, and the forks just respond, and it's like a tontine pillow. For those who don't know what that is, a fluffy duck pillow. I don't care what you call it, but it's a beautiful landing. But the real strength of the bike was shown in this piece of footage I've got here of slow-mo. Here we have a series of roots and ruts, and you can just see the suspension soaking it up. It truly is a remarkable suspension. But at the end of the day, you know, the combined forks and the rear shock does cost 9,000 Australian dollars. So I guess you'd want it to be. But the thing I'm saying is this suspension transforms this bike and really unleashes its true dirt heritage. The rear suspension is the same. It's just brilliant. You know, on those big erosion mounds, I'm up in the air and I'm flying through the air and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what this is going to land like. And the thing just comes down. I mean, this is a 200 kilo plus bike with fuel, and it just comes down beautifully like a dirt bike. So full marks to the suspension. But there are advantages and disadvantages to this longer travel. The advantages is that it gives you a little bit more ground clearance, you know, a couple of centimetres. But the disadvantage is on this bike, I'm now standing on tiptoes on 1 foot. There's no way in the world I can put 2 feet on the ground. But for me, that's not too much of an issue, because that's how my KTM890 is set up. And my Husky 701 is pretty close to that seat height as well. I'm comfortable with that, but there are many, many riders who wouldn't be. There is an option, a 240mm WP option. The suspension front and rear of the bike is fully adjustable, compression, rebound and preload. When I got this bike from Husqvarna, it was on standard settings. I haven't changed it. I've got to be frank, I don't know if I would. I just felt it was just ideal for me.
The Norden's 890cc parallel twin is a class leader. It has outstanding power delivery that is so useful for a dual sport bike. It's way over spec for the mantle of adventure tourer and has so much more to offer. With its very usable linear power delivery from around 1500 revs through to the late 5000, it does adventure touring on its head. There's a width and a depth to this power delivery, matched with thoughtful gear ratios and an outstanding forgiving clutch that means it can take on the tight, difficult stuff with as much ease as city traffic. But get that bike above 6,000 revs and heading above 8,000 and it deceptively turns into a rocket launcher. Gobs full of grunt that on the tar ensure your cheeks are stretched back to your ears. But for me, the real fun was had turning off traction control and going all natural, unfettered, uncluttered, dirt flying, 105 horsepower. Now that was fun. Husqvarna have nailed the engine, but then they go and back it up with class-leading technology that focuses on getting that power to the ground efficiently, safely, and in a way that ensures the rider has maximum enjoyment. Ride modes of street, rain and off-road change engine power delivery, throttle response, traction control according to conditions, and this can be done on the fly. Most bikes in this class have these options, but what sets Husqvarna apart from the pack is the sensitivity and response of the system. It's verging on intuitive, it's a real strength of the bike. For a couple of $100, you can add the Explorer mode that provides direct control over a range of functions, but most importantly adds slip control. I'd suggest those interested do some more research into what I'm talking about. Firstly, the bike has a slipper clutch that gives the rider maximum control under hard acceleration, braking and downshifting. The next feature that keeps you upright is motor slip regulation, or MSR, which is really important if you downshift too quickly and break traction. But the big one for me is cornering motorcycle traction control, MTC, that assists in keeping you upright. Within milliseconds, it alters engine power and output to stop you sliding out. Very useful for wet, slip-retard roads, worn dual sport tyres and a fatigue rider at the end of the day. MTC will keep you out of hospital, no doubt about it. Slip control is an optional extra for a couple of $100 that you would be insane not to get if you bought this bike. Slip control allows the rider to preset how much rear wheel slide they are going to experience when they accelerate. But it also assists in gaining traction in tricky, slippery conditions. It has 9 settings, with slip setting 1 allowing maximum controlled rear wheel slide and slip setting 9 the least. But I also found slip 9 very useful in slippery mud. The Bosch ABS system on this bike is another outstanding feature that includes cornering ABS, which is kind of like MTC in reverse. In this case, it allows riders to use the full power of the brakes whilst the Bosch system takes into consideration bike lean. Off-road ABS not only allows for rear wheel lock, but also reduces the influence of ABS on the front brake, ensuring maximum braking power and minimal intrusion in the quality of the ride experience. Now let's finish with this very economical engine that runs with semi-dry sump lubrication that improves fuel economy and contributes to the long 15,000k service intervals. During a real-world test, fuel economy came in at 4.5 litres per 100 kilometres during a day's ride of roughly 50% freeway and 50% dirt. That allowed me to get over 400 kilometres on the 20 litre tank. But a word of caution, if you spent the day on the dirt and going hard, I'd guess the fuel range would drop under that magic 400 k's.
Show it off, every curve, every part, yeah. Cause I'm strong and I love the skin. I'm in every shape, every inch. No doubt there's power deep within, yeah. Beauty ain't a color, ain't a number, ain't an age, nah. Beauty comes in every size and every shade, yeah. I'm perfect just the way I'm made, yeah. Whoa, whoa.
Thought I'd get all formal to talk about the modifications I'd make to this bike for Australian riding conditions. Sorry about the helmet here. First is the windshield. It's a little bit too small. It needs a little bit of an extension. It's not going to be good for long distances, I don't think. Next thing is, got to replace these handguards with bark busters, otherwise you're just going to snap levers. The stone guard underneath, just too light. You need a much more substantive bash plate. Got to have rally pegs. Rally pegs are wider and longer, really comfortable for standing. Next thing I'd get is some soft pannier racks, and if I could afford it, I'd get an Akrapovic or something a lot lighter. I like the sound of it, but ultimately it's about, for me, reducing weight. So this bike comes with the 9 grand WP Pro suspension, and it's unbelievable. But if I had the standard bike, I think I'd find that spring that's on the rear of the bike, it's just going to be a little bit too light, particularly if you're taking camping gear, and I think you're going to find that you'll have to up that spring rate. But if I was upping that spring rate, what I would do is actually replace that shock absorber with one a little bit higher spec that has adjustable compression damping. I think that's really important. And you don't have to spend a bomb on that, just to dramatically improve that. The front forks on the bike are excellent. I'm quite happy with the standard front forks, but the rear on the bike is just too soft for most Australian adventure riders, I think.
Oops, I forgot to mention the centre stand. A great addition for medium-sized twins, particularly for tyre changing. This Husqvarna centre stand was excellent, easy to use and stayed up and out of the way even when going hard. A big thanks to Husqvarna Australia for recognising that paper air filters just don't cut it in our fine dusty conditions. All bikes purchased in Australia are fitted with foam air filters. I love the styling of this bike and its versatility. It's far more capable than its label as an adventure tourer. But Husqvarna have a challenge because there'll be two distinct groups interested in this bike. The tourers seeking tar and light gravel, and higher skilled riders who want to push themselves and their bikes to their limits. For them, the bike's dirt heritage just can't be ignored. The Husqvarna Norden arrives in Australia at a time when the mid-sized adventure market is progressively being packed with competent alternatives that will challenge brand loyalties. Whilst the newly improved Yamaha Tenere Raid is still in the distance, immediate challenges are the budget special CF Moto, Aprilia Touareg and Benelli TRK series, and existing models of the KTM890 Adventure and Triumph Tiger Rally Pro. But the one generating the most interest is the Ducati Desert X, which is keenly priced and has a strong equipment level and due for release in Australia within months. Yep, certainly a great time to be in the market for a mid-sized adventure twin. For me, the Norden is at the top of the pack and an alternative to the KTM890. The classic styling protects riders from the elements and looks great. But behind those good looks is a bike of substance that I love riding.
Well, it's that time of the test when the audience get to ask me some questions, and there's a heap of them, so we'll get going. So, Rourke Bukel. Oh, I'm stoked you're going to test it with the good suspension. Seeing this as it's basically the same as the KTM 890 at that point, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the differences. The two bikes are so similar yet so different. Is the Norden just a KTM with mild suspension and a classy look, or is there more to it? There's a heap more to it. I think the review shows that. I think one of the basic things is the classic lines of this bike. It offers the rider protection. It has a different feel. There is subtlety in changes to the frame geometry of this bike that makes it beautiful and smooth on tarred roads, but it hasn't lost its dirt heritage. Just pull you up on the suspension. This is the 270mm WP Pro suspension. This is the next step up, as I understand, from the Adventure R, and it's amazing. A couple of items of interest here. How effective does the air filtration system look to be, and the ease of servicing in dusty conditions? Foam pre-filter options. So let's go through that first. My understanding is that there is an accessory for foam air filters, but I think in Australia, and I may have to be corrected, my understanding is that in Australia they come with foam air filters. The next question is, a tourer travel bike, can the engine handle low, poor fuel quality? I'm sorry, I'm not a technical expert, Robert Martin, so I'm not sure about that. Any suggested protection, such as improved skid plate and lower tank guards? For me, there's a range of skid plates. I'm not going to mention any in particular, but there's a range of effective aftermarket skid plates out there. Protection, it's interesting you raise protection. In my summary of the bike in terms of what I do for it in Australian conditions, I'm not interested. You know, if I trowel the bike and it's that bad, I'm gonna scratch all this anyway. I'll probably have to put a sticker kit over it. But just remember, these the fuel cells are really tough. I mean, and they offer a good bit of protection to the bike. So for me, I wouldn't be putting additional crash bars on this bike. Thoughts on the tubeless tyre system that uses rubber ring seal that has a suggested replacement frequency of 5 years? Look, I don't have a thought on that. What I like about tubeless tyres, and I ride tubes and tubeless tyres in the range of bikes that I have, I like both systems, and there's pluses and minuses with both systems. Is the factory centre stand worthy addition and has good fitment and ground clearance, or stay with a side stand only? No, Robert, I absolutely recommend the centre stand for this bike. It's brilliant. It's easy to get up and down off on the bike, and it stays out of the way. And I've been really hammering the bike and listening for any sounds of it flopping around. It's not flopping around, and you'll see some excerpts within my review talking about that. But yeah, no, it's excellent centre stand, and it's one of the must-haves for, I think, for any of these mid-range twins. It just makes tyre changing easy. Okay, Geo Mac Grandad. This is going to be an interesting with Clubby, Nugget, and Nugget for fun. Unfortunately, Nugget couldn't be with us. He's injured his back. And yeah, it's very disappointing, and he's disappointed, but we hope to get him back on the bike soon. So yeah, we wish Nugget well in his recovery. Chasp O, look forward to the review, mate. My question is broadly, what's the point? We now have CF Moto, KTM Husk on the same platform. I'm curious as to what the killer Norden features is that sets it apart. Also, its standard fare. Okay, this is very different. I just rode the CF Moto the other day. The review will be out next Sunday. I only rode it for a couple of hours, and I only rode it on tar, but it's so muddy up in the forest where I'm at the moment. You just can't test bikes properly anyway, as evidenced by the test of this bike. Yeah, so I've ridden the CF Moto. I can assure you the Husky's way above the CF Moto in terms of a whole range of things that I will talk about in this review, as you know, and you've already seen me talk about them. The KTM890 is a very different bike to the Husky. There's, as I said, there's slight changes in frame geometry, so I'm not going to go back over that again. But the other thing is that traditional adventure shape, it punches the wind around you. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed with the windscreen. At this price point, that really should be adjustable, and it's not quite there. My Klim Krios Pro helmet is the smoothest helmet I've ever had in terms of buffeting. It just doesn't buffet, and this is the first bike that I've had where I've had minor buffeting issues. Not big ones, but a little bit irritating. But no, it's a very different bike to the KTM, a very different riding experience. Planet GSA, after the test rides, I'd be interested to learn how you compare the 901 with the BMW GSA. I've recently sold my 1250 GSA and currently just own a couple of 701 Enduros, but I'm interested in an honest opinion of the 901 and how it copes to being used off-road. Well, I think if you're watching the review, you've seen how it goes off-road, and my assessment is that Husky have undered it. They've called it a tourer, an adventure tourer, and as I've showed you, it's got a lot more potential than that. So it's certainly got its off-road credentials. The BMW GSA is a great bike, and again, you know, I always encourage you've just got to ride the different bikes. But at that price point, you know, you've really got to know what you're chasing, because that's a great handling bike too. And I remember flying through the air on that bike, and no, it was excellent. GQ, with the premium WP suspension, is there any reason to consider the 1290? How close does this make the Norden to a candidate for a single bike stable? Does it tempt you away from the T7? And last question, with the premium suspension, who is this bike for? I think I'll start at the back. The premium suspension is unbelievable. It just gives, it's so adaptable to all riding conditions, and I've never ridden on anything like it. It's just brilliant. But that's $9,000. And yeah, there'll be a few people in Australia that will buy that, and probably throughout the world. It is amazing. I think the advantage of that system is once you've bought that suspension, you can take that through for other bikes. And when you buy that suspension on this bike, you keep the standard suspension. So that comes with the bike. So you can just fit that and then carry your suspension with you. My view is that that's an investment for the future, and you can put that on a number of different bikes. Obviously KTM Husky, there may be other fitments I'm not sure of. Just continue on with GQ's questions. Is there any reason to consider the 1290? The 1290 is a super tourer, and that's a different level again. I'd be reluctant to take the 1290 in what I took this in. Yeah, that's for big open plains, that's for 2-up, and for those riders who really appreciate the grunt. Does it tempt you away from your T7? Gee, I've been thinking about that a lot. Yeah, my T7 now is set up. I've spent a heap of time and research, as you know, on suspension, so my suspension is dialed in. The twins are lovely bikes. You know, I have the Husky 701, which is the single, and that's great, and you know, fantastic bike. But there's something about twins when you get into the open trails and you can just cruise along. It's very relaxing. Does it tempt me away? I'd have to say yes, but it's funny, in its standard form, it needs work on that rear shock, which, pardon the pun, I found shocking for a Husky. I mean, when I buy a Husqvarna, there's 3 things I think about. Handling, suspension, and engine. And they're always right up there. And on this Norden, yeah, I don't know why, but that rear shock doesn't even match the front forks. The front forks, to me, handle what I want to do on this bike, but the rear suspension doesn't, and I find that a strange decision by Husky, and I'd like to know from them why they did that, why they wouldn't put a slightly upgraded rear shock on this bike. Doesn't have to be much, but one with compression damping, and I don't know, it's them that make the decision. I guess many people, there may be say a third to 50% of the riders probably won't take this bike anywhere near what we've done during the test. But what I would say is, if you hit a sharp pothole or a washout, you will quickly find the limits of that suspension, and it could be quite unsettling. Okay, Joshua Tamman, would you travel around the world on it? Yes, unbelievably comfortable, great seated, great standing. Yeah, Joshua, could do that tomorrow. Aussie Reinhardt, my main concerns are as follows: weight and height issues. The weight, it's one of the lowest weights in its class. Don't quote me on the figure, I don't have it in my head, but it's down low. But most importantly, the centre of gravity is very low. But all these twins, you're looking at around 200 kilograms plus. Height of the seat, I've shown the height of the seat. For me, at 178 centimetres, it's the balls of my feet that are touching the ground on the standard suspension. On this bike, I'm tiptoes on one side. Maintenance and spare parts availability in $1 Unfortunately, on these reviews, we don't look at maintenance and availability of parts, and you've got to go to different internet forums to see what customers are experiencing. Dune to dust. Is the big suspension a factory option model or fitment after purchasing? It's a fitment after purchasing, dunes to dust. Also, which bike would lend itself to tall or short riders between the 901 and 890. It's very much of a muchness. And remember, you've got height adjustment in the seats. You've got about 20 mils height adjustment as well in these seats. It's very similar. What I would say is this 270 mil suspension, though, if you're not confident with being on a tall bike, you're not going to find this pleasant when you stop at traffic lights or you're in the bush and you're at one of those moments where it could go either way. Yeah, it's not going to be pleasant for you. Still waiting. This is DRZ Rider. Still waiting patiently for the 501 Norden. Yeah, I would like to think I like the KTM890 Adventure R, but I'd like to think it was more dirt oriented if one of those comes about. Nick B, what annoyed me most about these motorcycles is the single blinky LED on your dashboard for both the right and left turn signal. Gotta say, Nick, I'm not a great fan of that either, but it told me the blinkers were on, so that was good enough for me. Dave Watts. Dave, I hope it rides better than it looks, mate. Just the look alone wouldn't tempt me from my T7. Rarely walk away from my bike without looking back at it. I'm guessing the headlight can be used to keep goldfish in. Dave, I love the look of this bike, and from my experience, and I've had two of these bikes for the last couple of weeks, when I park the bike anywhere, people just start walking up and looking at it. Like, it's visually far more attractive than the KTM890. I'm going to put it out there. You know, the 890 has a tendency to disenfranchise some people. They don't like the look of that tank. It's kind of, you know, the tank's low and it's kind of bulbous. And we all know the 890 Adventure R is the best mid-range dirt bike out there. It's amazing. But this is far more refined, and I think it looks nice. I don't mind the Minion look. I think the Minion looks nice, and the headlights certainly work well. Yeah, so walk away from your T7. There's a lot of T7 lovers out there. Brad G, I own a Norden. My question to you is, what is your honest opinion about the engine heat blown on your legs when you're going 20 to 40 miles per hour? It's the only thing that bothers me. Brad, you'll find that's in the review. Yeah, I was surprised by that. I mean, most bikes these days, the KTM890, Ducati, I can think of a whole range of bikes that make sure they don't blow that air on the lower legs, and I was surprised by that. Elliot, what is the like to pick up from the ground? Well, Elliot, I didn't drop it, touch wood, got to get it back, so I don't know. Garth Shoot, looking forward to it. Michael Gleason, is the Husqvarna Norden 901 just a KTM 890 with different bodywork? I've answered that question. No. Is this just badge engineering like the car industry? Look, I think there's a little bit of that, but when you think about it, the research and development that went into the KTM 790 and then 890 Adventure series was amazing, and they nailed it. And to just be able to grab that rolling stock, if you like, I think it's been a huge advantage. And I'm a fan of that sort of stuff. If you've got something that works, keep it. Is it badge engineering? No, I don't see it like that at all. It's certainly there'll be efficiency in that, but I think the riders are winning with it. I understand why it's happened. It's a cheap way of getting new model into the market if you look at the costs of going from a blank sheet of paper. Okay, yeah, you don't have to design the engine on this bike and you don't have to design the rolling stock and the frame, but you still got to design all the rest of it, and it is different. I want to make that clear. This is not a KTM, and it handles slightly differently. Okay, this is going to be a popular one. That's a hot bike right there. Well, there's a lot of people that agree with you. Okay, we've still got, and this is the thing, there was amazing interest in the Norden, so there's still another 36 questions. So I don't know if anyone will be watching this end of the review, but we'll wait to see the rating. So let's keep going. The Moto Barista. As the owner of a 790R, I can confidently assume that a Norden with Pro suspension components may just be the ultimate adventure bike. Okay, I'm going to stick it out there, the Moto Barista. If someone said you can have an 890 or a Norden tomorrow, I'd pick the Norden. I like the styling of the Norden. I find it appealing and attractive, and it motivates me to want to be on the bike. And I know there's slight changes in the handling, but for me, this handles well in the dirt, and I'm happy with its dirt bike heritage. And it also protects me a bit. And if it wasn't for this bloody screen, I don't understand why they didn't put more effort into sorting out that screen. It's interesting that they've got an accessory for a screen extender. Yeah, it surprises me, and I guess what it is that, I can imagine the tension between stylists and engineers, when they're making that screen. The stylists would be saying, oh, that looks beautiful on this bike. But motorcycling's got to be functional, and this is a mid-sized adventurer, or they call it an adventure tourer, and the standard for adventure tourers is to protect riders from wind buffeting, and that's an expectation at that level. Okay, right, Jeff Turner, is it light? Well, it's one of the lightest there, but the most important thing is the center of gravity is low, and we've talked about that. Is it powerful? I'll tell you the most fun I had on it, I turned off the motorcycle traction control completely and just ran it naked, for want of a better word. This has some poke, and lots of fun. I just caution people who haven't got much experience in the dirt that you really need to know and understand motorcycles to rev the crap out of that in those gears, because you're hanging on for dear life. Is it comfortable? It's amazingly comfortable, Jeff, standing or seated. Can I put my feet flat down? Well, Jeff, I don't know how tall you are. If you're pygmy, no. If you're my height, 5'10" or 178 centimeters tall, you'll be able to put the balls of your feet down. Okay, Noel Winfield. How much extra bodywork protection does it need, if any, for off-road use and the occasional drop? How is the wind protection to the rider and the stock fairing and windshield? Are modifications available if needed? Okay, so I think I've talked about the windshield enough. No, it's not quite right for me, but every rider's different. In terms of protection, if I bought this bike, the thing that I'd be more interested in is getting rid of the stone guard and getting a proper bash plate, and I'm just going to risk this. And the fuel cells offer a lot of protection to the engine, but if you trowel it, yeah, you're certainly going to, this is a lot of real estate there, and I don't know, you'll get a sticker kit, or you're going to have to pay for a very large, I'd say expensive piece of plastic that goes around there. Okay, Andrew Orman, love Dave and Nugget. Yeah, it's a pity the other half weren't here. I mean, Husky gave us 2 bikes so Nugget could ride with me. Let's hope that Nugget gets better soon. I'd like to think he'll be on a bike in a couple of months. All right, Alec Dunscombe, love mine. That fork and shock setup I feel I'm needing already. Pushing it like an MX or EXC don't help the stock setup. Yeah, the second you start pushing this bike, the suspension, well, I think the front suspension holds out fine, but the rear is just not up to what I would expect from Husqvarna. Is it reliable? Don't know. It hasn't been out long. You've got to watch the other forums for that. This is DB. Would you have taken it on your London to Sydney trip? Yeah, it'd be very comfortable for that. What bike would be the closest competition? Well, this mid-size adventure market right now is hot competition. And, I'm just thinking of some of the things I've tried lately, and it's just amazing. And what's coming, there's the Aprilia, there's the Desert X. The Desert X is really well spec'd up and competitive price, and that will be going head to head with this Norden. But, one that I don't know why why it doesn't have the sales that it should have, and that's the Triumph Tiger Rally Pro. I mean, the level of equipment on that bike's, the level of accessories is quite extraordinary. And the suspension, when you just roll it out of the shop, is excellent. And yeah, it's probably one of the most stated bikes, I think, in that mid-range. And then you got the CF Moto, and you know, I rode that the other day. Is it at this level? No, it's not. Can you have fun on it? Yes, you can. And it's a great entry-level bike. I mean, we've just heard that interest rates are going up 5%. Sorry, whoop, stop, didn't say that. Just heard that inflation's going up 5%. You know, people are struggling. And the CF Moto offers an opportunity to get into our sport, and I'm all for that. And it's, you know, cheap and cheerful's a word I'd kind of walk around, but I think that really accurately sums that up. It did everything pretty well. Electronics were back about 5 years ago, though. Okay. Okay, Redmond to buy you. Please don't tell me I need to spend $9,000 more on Boingers, Dave. No, you don't. But as I've said in the summary, if you're riding this in Australian conditions and you're going to carry a load on the back, that rear shock's going to need upgrading. And if you're taking the rear shock out of this bike, I really think you need at least a minimum of the next level up of shock absorber. One, as I've talked about before, with compression damping. The front forks are okay. I don't mind them. I get the nature of what Husky are pressing here. It's just that, you know, they just went a bit short on the shock absorber at the rear. All right, shaft drive. Can you give your experience with KTM reliability? There are many who don't think the bikes are worth getting due to failures. Of course, more amplified than everyone goes online to complain, but you ever hear of others who have trouble-free miles? So I'm on my third KTM, and two before them been trouble-free. Yeah, look, motorcycling is tribal, and that in some ways assists motorcycle manufacturers in generating ideas and you know, views about different bikes. I've had many KTMs. I rode across, you know, to the road of bones. I rode the length of Siberia on a 5-year-old KTM890. Didn't miss a beat. Yeah, I did have a couple of problems with my KTM690 going from London to Sydney. That bike at that time in 2012 had problems with fuel injectors, fuel pumps, roller rocker arms. There was a truckload of things. It wasn't KTM's proudest moment. And, you know, if I had any recommendation for KTM, you know, when you get a model like that, you need to do your darndest to make sure it doesn't happen again. And whoever those parts suppliers that gave you those crappy parts, you need to go and, you know, just rough them up a bit, because they wrecked the brand. And apart from that, I haven't had a problem with KTMs. And that's why I like them. I like their handling, I like the characteristics of the engine, and I like their suspension. And I like the fact that they keep improving models year after year and reflecting on what they've done and then moving forward. And a lot of the Japanese makes make a bike and then sit on it for 10 years and then just change the sticker kit each year. And that's not what KTM nor Husqvarna are about. And that's what attracts me to them. So, where are we up to? Big Rock Moto, looking forward to it. Big Rock Moto, you've done some brilliant work on the Norden and other bikes. I've really enjoyed watching what you do. Keep it up. It's great to see another YouTuber out there doing thorough reviews, and I really enjoy your work. Chris York, I think I'd put in Lexan window to check coolant level. That might be a good idea. Ryan Uren, how do you compare the Norden to the Triumph Tiger Rally Pro you've recently tested? It's bloody close, and it's closer than you think, because the Rally Pro has really good suspension straight out of the box, and has a whole lot of accessories. And this is the thing I'm saying, Ryan, you're out there, you really have to get your calculator to work out what you want, because that is a cracking bike at a cracking price and with a cracking engine and beautiful handling. And for some reason, not many people buy it at the moment, and I don't know why. Geomac Grandad, does the traction control help an experienced rider or just create more hassles? Traction control on this, the Bosch traction control, and this is the latest generation of that, is amazing. I fear that riders who haven't come up in the dirt or just get on this bike and this is their first bike, they will not have a knowledge what they should have in terms of traction. It's just that good. It's very effective. You saw me in this video with terrible mud, putting it on slip control 9 and just idling out of the mud. It was brilliant. So slip control, no, it's not a fad, and it's something very worthy, and a safety feature that can stop you dropping the bike, particularly when you're fatigued. So I'm a great supporter of it. Yeah, there's a couple of things that you've said, Geomac, it's just not right. Yeah, you can spin the bike up. You can do a whole range of things. Just you select different traction control settings. It's amazingly quick, as I'll demonstrate later on. And you can just move through those settings very quickly on the Husky. It's a great strength of this bike. How are the headlights when riding at night on back roads? They're excellent. There's a little driving light. Oh, sorry, this is Jimmy Stewpot. There's a little driving light here, and you see the driving lights at the front. They give a really broad spread. Great for spotting kangaroos. Really impressed with it. Paul Davis, I noticed on paper between the Norden and the T7 that the wheelbase is significantly different. You've experienced on both motorcycles. Do you mind touching on if you felt the difference and under what circumstances? Look, they're completely different bikes. The T7 is slightly top heavy, but it's a great handling bike. This bike is not top heavy. They're roughly around the same price. I mean, you can go kilo picking. They're all around 200 kilograms. If they land on you, they're going to hurt. Yeah, different handling dynamic. The T7 for power sliding, that it just sits in it and goes. And but remember, mine's had a lot of work on it. So yeah, no, mine's a great handling bike. But this is straight out of the box, a great handling bike, apart from that rear end. Does it feel too heavy like a T7 when full of fuel? No, it doesn't, because it holds its fuel low. So this feels a lot lighter. When you're sitting on the bike or throwing it around, it feels significantly lighter than a T7. And I own a T7. So, all right. Amando Morago. Some issues in the quality control. Some owners note liquid cooler drops, rear shock problems, loose parts. Well, I can only go off the bikes that I've got, and I've got them from Husky, and they've been excellent. I think the only thing I've noticed is there's a fastener down there. It's too long, and it has the potential to hit the header. And I've talked to Husky about it. It must have been just the wrong fastener. Lubjo Rajic, very nice. Michael Cooper, can you compare the Husky 701, please, for purpose relatively? Hang 5 on that one, Michael. I'll finish off with that question. One more. Mick McM, most people would prefer a stock suspension. Bike review. Mick, you're getting it. You know, I don't know why there's all this aggression. You know, I've got 2 bikes. I've got the standard bike and I've got this one, the 270mm. So I'm confident that you'll get a very good appreciation of the standard suspension. Now, what I've done in the video on the top left of the screen, every time I'm filming, I'll put what sort of suspension it is, unless it's obvious. So the first portion of the review, it's got standard suspension the whole way through. So that is a complete standard stock Norden 901 review. In the second half, when I'm riding with Clubby, most of the time I'm on the 270mm, but there's a short period of time when I'm on the standard bike to compare them immediately. So just settle down, mate. It's all good. Okay, so let's get back to that final question. Can you, from Michael Cooper, can you compare the Husky 701 relatively? All right, so just happen to have my Husky 701 here. So this is the one we rode across the top end. Nugget had one as well. Outstanding bike, and when you want to do the tough stuff and long distances, this is my weapon of choice. It's light, it's around 140 kilograms, probably a bit more, but not too much because I've really kept it light. Like, it doesn't have any racks on it at the moment. It was set up for a very challenging ride. Unfortunately, I got hit with COVID and that stopped that. But back on the mend, and looking forward to getting back on this bike. But this bike complements the 901. It complements it. And right now, if you said to me what I'd like in my garage, I'd like, well, this isn't going anywhere. This is brilliant. And that'd be a good mix for me. But in the other shed's the T7. So we better not talk too loud. But I still enjoy riding the T7. But yeah, could you get away with one of the... If I had to get away with one of these right now, I'd take the Norden and I'd have a Husky 300 and that'd do me. But, you know, to compare these, they just complement each other, what they can do. This can take you anywhere. It's like a big dirt bike and it's got this lovely screen on it, punches the wind. And it's funny, isn't it? This screen is better than that screen. Yeah, it may not look that appealing, but for riding this bike at speed, this is actually more stable than that screen. So go figure. I don't think the stylists would like that too much, but it's functional and it works. And it's a Husky part. So there you go. So thank you so much. There's a huge amount of questions, but what it indicates is there's a huge amount of interest and you like what I have to say. And you know, we try to shoot straight from the hip, and I hope you appreciate that. We don't always see it the way motorcycle manufacturers see it, but we see it the way we see it, and I hope you appreciate that. Some of you get critical sometimes and say, "Oh, you're not that critical of bikes." I just want to touch on that briefly to sum up. My view is there's a huge team of people that get together to design and make a bike, and they're under enormous pressure from a whole range of different factors, and particularly at the moment for economic factors. And you know, there's a tension that goes to building bikes, and they're trying to build the best bike they can. And I take that into consideration when I do these reviews. So thank you very much for watching. I've had a lot of fun with this review, a great bike, and look forward to seeing you for the CF Moto review. And then we're down in Tasmania on the BMW Safari, and following the BMW Safari, we're onto the Tenere Tragics with Clubby, and I look forward to riding with Clubby and all the gang with that one. So stick with us on Mad TV, lots coming up. This is a long review. If I was watching this, I'd just stop it 20 minutes in, go away, come back the next day and watch another 20 minutes. But stuff it, I'm going to put it up all in one go. Thanks for watching.